welcome back to Today I'm Talking To, and today I'm talking to stand-up comedian Adam Muller. Yay!
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. This is fantastic.
Hooray! Welcome to Enstarz. Today I'm Talking To.
Oh, it's called Today I'm Talking To.
Yeah,
So that's why you said that twice at the beginning.
This specific
Today
show.
I'm talking to.
Yeah, redundancy is crucial at any great
terrific,
thing.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So starting off with a fun, silly question: what's the weirdest place you've ever performed a show, or like the weirdest show you've ever had?
Oh, well, you know the weirdest places are probably like some of the outdoor places during the lockdown when everything was closed, like someone's backyard that was covered in a sheet of ice and everyone's just kind of sliding around, and your hands are freezing. But I feel like that's kind of been done. Like that's been talked about like ad nauseum at this point.
Yeah.
Everyone has these jokes about like during the pandemic I had to perform on roofs, and yeah, we did, and it sucked, but whatever. But the weirdest indoor place. Like the word like I did like a show at like a pizza place on Staten Island, where there was like the restaurant probably sat like 100 people, and there was like 6 there for the show, and they all sat in the back of the room, and then just like ate their pizza and talked to each other. So it was like you were just performing to nobody.
We love when that happens.
But that was weird and not that much fun.
Did they react at all to the comedy, or
No.
no?
The only thing you had to go on was there was like a couple other comics that were sitting like behind this curtain behind the stage, and you could hear them chuckle. And that was all you had. And you didn't know if they were laughing at the joke or just laughing at the absurdity of the situation that no one was actually listening. But then you're in your mind, you're like, well, you're going to have to do this next, so.
Like you're coming up, so get ready.
Get ready. It's going to be fun.
Where there were only 2 audience members, which everyone's like, oh, you never know who they are though, except they drove me there. So like they were my friends.
That's all.
And they were like, this
that's
is the worst.
But the thing is, like, it's not the fact that there were 6 people that made it bad. Because I did a show once for 4 people. Like it was a couple and then 2 guys who were buddies with each other, and they sat in the very front and were into it and listened and laughed, and like it was actually like an incredibly fun show.
Yeah.
So it's not that like, I mean, obviously not ideal. That's not what you want, and that's certainly not what the booker and producer who's trying to make a living making comedy shows would want. But like as a show, it was kind of fun. It's when they're like, if you have 4 people but they sit in the back and they don't pay attention, it's like, well, what's the point?
Yeah, it's like they chose to come there. It's
Right.
kind of on them as well.
No, I remember that one specifically because the producer, booker guy, whatever, was like, he asked him, he's like, we don't have to do this. There's only 4 of you. We don't have to do the show. We could just give you free tickets to come back tomorrow night. Because it was like a Friday late show or something. You can come back to either show Saturday and be part of like a bigger audience. And they're like, well, we got our babysitter for tonight. We're already here. They all wanted to have the show. Oh. So we did it.
That's weird that they were like, yep, you're here for it. But then they were like, I'm going to stay back though.
Well, I think for the couple, I think it was like, it wasn't so much they were at a comedy show, it was they had like a couple hours away from their kid. They're like, we're not giving that up.
We are not leaving.
And we're not going to be able to replicate that tomorrow, so we're not leaving. We may never go back to our child.
That's the spirit. Depending on how this night goes, we might just leave them behind. So you said comedy before the pandemic. How long have you been doing comedy for?
Like 5.5 years-ish.
Do you keep it on your watch?
I did look at the month.
Oh, got it. Got it. So so
you have a little thing on my watch. It just clicks up every second since I started comedy.
It's like one of those days without accidents board, except it's like you're.
Oh yeah. Do you have a thing at home like days without a bomb? It's always at 0.
Yeah, it's always at an absolute 0. So how did you start getting into comedy? So 5.5 years ago. So that's September. That's not September. It's the opposite of September. Not
it was
the
like
opposite,
July.
half of September.
It was May, July, somewhere in there, 2017 is when I like would claim that I started. Mm-hmm. But I took like one comedy class in 2010. But it was like a standard class, right? Where like once a week for 6 weeks, and it's kind of like an open mic in the sense that you get in front of the class and you try to tell jokes that you've written that week, and the teacher and the class gives you some feedback, and then you come back the next week, and then at the end you do a show where you invite all your family and friends, and it's usually a pretty supportive show, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And I did that in 2010, but that was it. I did like the class, took the show, had a great time, and I was too busy at work, and that was it. But I enjoyed it, and I never forgot that I'd taken it. And then 7 years later-ish, like the job I was at ended, and I had some free time, and I was looking for a job, but I was like, well, you can't look for a job for like 24 hours a day. Like I should use this time to do something fun and interesting. So I took a screenwriting class, which is not comedy. And that was cool. And I was 2 or 3 weeks into the screenwriting class, and I was like, this is really fun. I'm learning I'm trying to write a screenplay or whatever. That's part of the class. I'm still not filling up my day completely because I'm only looking for a job 3 to 4 hours a day. It's
Yeah.
So I'll take another class, and I was like, oh, that stand-up class I took way back 7 years ago, that was fun. Why don't I just do that again? And I did no research. I just went back to the same exact teacher. She was still teaching, still doing the same exact class, the same structure. So I just took it again. A woman named Linda Smith.
Linda Smith.
And the class was, it was like affiliated with Caroline's, where your class show at the end was at Caroline's.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I just took her class again. And then when that class ended, I just stopped looking. I just kept going. Mm-hmm. I kind of stopped. And at some point I was like, well, I haven't looked for a job in months.
It's been just comedy.
And then I was like, oh, I'll just keep doing this. This is fun.
So why did you take the first class then? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a good question. Like in 2010.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'll tell you why I took it. I don't know how. Like, I don't remember exactly when I came to this conclusion. But the conclusion was that, like, I was working in finance. I was at a point now where I was doing a lot of presentations to, like, CEOs and CFOs and boards of directors and stuff. And it was always, like, terrifying. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I want to be more comfortable, like, public speaking. And for some reason, this is the leap I don't remember how I made. But for some reason, I thought, oh, a stand-up comedy class will solve that.
Interesting.
Like, and I don't know if it's like, I was like, if I try to be funny and I'm not, and then it all ends and everything's fine, I will no longer be afraid of talking to some CEO about some company they should acquire. You know what I mean? Yeah. And for some reason, that logic, I don't know how that logic got in my head, but that was the logic. And then I probably just Googled comedy class, and the Carolines one was at the top. That's my guess. Yeah. And then I took it for 6 weeks, had a great time. And I'm not sure, like, it probably helps in terms, like, but then shortly after that, I left finance anyway, so it doesn't matter.
So
left that job.
Yeah. I feel like I hear about fewer people, like, taking acting or a comedy type thing or some arts thing to become more comfortable with public speaking is something that I know people do a lot. Yeah, yeah. But I feel like I hear more about people doing improv to get better. Oh, like business improv. Like, was that ever on the radar, or was it just like, I know you said you don't remember the jump, but like, was that something you thought about, or you're like, no, I think comedy instead?
No, and subsequent, like when I started, post 2017, once I started doing stand-up, I did take a couple improv classes because I did want to like explore that like skill set. Not because I wanted to do improv, but I thought it would be like helpful to my stand-up writing, actually, which I think it is, and we can talk about that if you want. Yeah. But at the time, when I came to this conclusion that a stand-up comedy class would help my public speaking, I had no idea that improv existed or what it was. So it wasn't like I chose stand-up. It's just somehow I came to that conclusion. I probably, like, if someone had said improv, I'm not sure I would have known what they were talking about.
That's fair.
But like, I would imagine, like, in hindsight, I imagine an improv class would be just as good in terms of like just getting over that, because it's a fear of sort of being performative in front of people that are going to judge you, right? Yeah. And just being comfortable. So I would think an improv class would also be incredibly helpful for like the confidence that is required to speak publicly. Yeah, because what is funny is I just see a lot of like improv for business people classes, because I know I said my uncle, so I'm just going to stick with that. I don't know, I tried to backtrack to family member, but like, it's my uncle. I remember he was in sales at the time, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm taking this like business improv class. Like, what's the difference? Like, regular improv, you're like, we need a word, and they're like coconut, and business improv, they're like pivot table, like spreadsheet. Like, was that the difference? I think the difference is the assumption is that everyone there will be probably kind of bad at improv. That's any improv class if you ask me, but... I'm kidding, kind of. No, but if it's all people that are there for the same purpose, which is we're going to go back to business. We're not trying to be the next SNL superstar. I think that's sincerely what I mean. The spirit's not like, I want to be an improviser. I'm here But I imagine the business improv. Like if I was secretly like I want to do SNL or something,
Yeah.
and I want to get good at improv, I'd probably take the business one instead of the regular one because I think they'd be like more serious about it. Like
Yeah.
they're there for a very specific reason, so they're gonna like follow the directions and try to do it. Whereas I feel like a regular improv class, there's all kinds of like weirdos that have wandered in off the street.
Absolutely true. No shade. I've taken many an improv class. Love improv. No
Yeah.
shade. But yeah, improv's a real place for weirdos.
But I do think I think improv classes are great
Oh, they're amazing.
in terms of, but like it's a difficult sort of. I don't know what. I think stand up has a clearer, in my mind, a clearer like career path in a way, even though it's still incredibly difficult and convoluted and confusing.
Yeah.
Whereas like improv, I think there's a little bit less directly you can do with it.
I completely agree. I think that stand up, as far as like art forms go, still incredibly insane, but is probably the closest thing to like a linear art form there is, where you can be like, oh, we're going from here, and like that's what the clear next step up is, and like you can kind of choose what the next is.
You can know when you're getting somewhere a little
Yeah.
bit. Whereas I think in a lot of the other ones, it would like until you've made it, you have no idea that you're doing well.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you jumped into this stand up class just to be like, oh, I want to start talking to people.
Yes.
When was a moment that what was stand up part of like something that was like part of your life? Did you watch a lot of stand up? Was it even really on the radar, or was it just such a completely random like, oh yeah, stand up sounds
Oh, it
right.
was so random.
Interesting.
Because like I wasn't like consuming a bunch of stand up as a kid. Like I remember hearing a few bits here and there like randomly that that someone's playing and you kind of pay attention. You're like, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But I wasn't one of these like kids that was like from the moment I heard my first stand up album, it's all I've ever wanted to do kind of thing. And I hadn't really paid that much attention to it until somehow I thought, oh, I should do a stand up class, and then I did it, and then 7 years later I was like, oh, I'll do that again. Then I kind of started like paying attention to it and like researching, kind of getting on YouTube and watching people and listening to albums and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So it really was like just that 7 years later, you were like, oh yeah, I did that time.
That was fun. I should do that again. I have the time.
Yeah. So what do you
and then
think?
it clicked for some reason in a different way.
Yeah.
Also because I had free time. Mm-hmm. Like if I had gotten it, if when my job had ended, if like the first interview I'd had afterwards, I'd just gotten a job that I was willing to do, like that would have been that, I think.
Yeah.
Life is just so random that way, I think.
It's so random. Yeah, like it's such a weird thing. And I think everyone feels this pressure to make a story that's like, no, and I started here, and that's when I knew. And it's like, no, you didn't. Like, it just happened. Maybe
I don't trust
you did.
anyone that knows what they're doing tomorrow. No, like but these people that have had like a career plan since they were in like middle school.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just don't. Either you're just parroting what someone else, like what a parent or someone is telling you, but if you've come up with that on your own, like you're insane.
Or at least I think there's always like I just think it changes so much because like people have dreams. I don't know, but like I think everything morphs so much because you're like, oh, this is infinitely complicated. Oh, life is strange.
But don't you think like when every once in a while someone will be like, it's to me, they'll be like, oh, someone who knew me from when I was like a corporate guy. It's it's so great that you're living your dream. Like I'm not. Like dreams are things that like don't happen. Like you wake up and that was it. Like I don't know if you're living your dream, like dream better, like reach further.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I know that
I agree.
Maybe it's just like semantics, but like my dream is like scoring the winning goal in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, and the Maple Leafs win the Stanley Cup. Like that ship has sailed. You know? Like
yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
So, like, what would you say your goal is then as a comedian, or do you not have, or like just as a person? Like, do you not have one?
It's like you weren't sure if I was a person. No, it's a very good question because, like, I think it's important to have goals, particularly like shorter term goals, because like whenever you put a stake in the ground and say I want to do this, I think it helps you motivate to do it. And it makes you like there's some like for me anyway, something about the pressure of something that's like on the calendar or a timeline helps me be far more productive. But like the long-term goals are tricky because like there's this question of like how realistic do you make it, right?
Yeah.
Like if my long-term goal was to be like I want to do a late night comedy set on like the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Well, okay, that's a lofty goal, but also something that's like theoretically within my grasp. That could absolutely happen.
Yeah.
If my goal was like, I want to sell out Carnegie Hall for 20 nights in a row, it's like, well, maybe like dial it back a bit.
Yeah.
Like even doing that once is something that very few people ever get to do. So it's not as realistic. So I think you can have kind of both, as long as like if you don't achieve the one, you're not like disappointed.
Yeah.
Like the goal can't, like that lofty goal can't be sort of your definition of success or making it, or you're just going to always be disappointed. Which I think happens to some people, but for some people it's also how they motivate themselves. But having like a goal that's like a bit of a stretch, but also like achievable if you like work hard and get lucky a little bit here and there, that seems reasonable to me.
Yeah. So like what would being like making it be to you within?
Oh, wow. I think it would be like just being able to pay the bills doing comedy.
Yeah.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
That makes sense. I feel like that's the answer that I feel like so many people think that creative and entertainment people will be like, I want to be famous. But almost everyone I talk to, like myself very much included, I'm like, I just want to do this, do the art thing. End of sentence.
Right. But don't you think like that's it? I feel like it's often when you're it's not an age thing, but when you're where I'm at in terms of comedy, your goal is to pay your bills doing comedy. And then you achieve that. And if someone asks, and your goal should be then something more. Yeah. Like it shouldn't be like, oh, I've made it. I'm good. I'm done. Yeah. Like now I just do this. And you like that you'll get bored. You should. Yeah. Then your goal is, I don't know, I want to do a Netflix special, an HBO special, or I want to write and produce like a comedy movie or like something else that's harder, that you had to get to the first one before you get to the second one. But I think if you ask someone that's already paying their bills, they'll have a whole different level. Like at every level, you find something else to be frustrated and complain about.
Yeah, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of dreaming big. You have to like get the first step so you can like build it up. Yeah.
And no matter what you get, there's someone that's done more than you faster and better.
Yeah.
So you could, if you let that get under your skin, you'll just be upset forever.
Then you'll be always sad. But no, not oh, never mind. But
there are pharmaceuticals for that.
Yes, exactly. Problem solved. But you mentioned even in this hypothetical, but also before, that you took a screenwriting class. Is that something you're still trying to do, or like how did you get into that? Is that something that was another random spur of the moment? Or?
No, that one was a little more calculated, because I've always loved movies and loved screenwriting. I've played around on my own at various points, probably since in college and beyond, of like, oh, I should write a movie. And without any structure or training or understanding of like the format or how you like what it takes, but just I'll just open a Word document and write a movie. And then you get 10, 12 pages of notes, and then you move on to something else and you never do anything. So there's always something in the back of my mind where it's like, oh, that'd be fun to just kind of understand how to do it. And again, like the structure of a class where they're like, if you've come every week and sort of do the homework and follow along, but at the end of it, you will have, in this particular class, you won't have a full screenplay, but you'll have like a story map of the whole thing and an understanding of how to then take that and write the screenplay. And then they gave you like a certain amount of time to do that, if that makes sense. But anyway, if you do all that, you'll end up with like a story map and an understanding of how you would take that and actually write the screenplay, which I did. Like I did all that, and I came up with like a story that isn't like the greatest. Like I think that what happens a lot in the creative process, right, is you want this like perfect story to tell, and it's so hard to come up with that you just never get past step one. So I was like, I got it. The key to like making this class work was to come up with a story that you're gonna see through to completion, and then sticking with it, even though whenever you do something that's like that big in scope, you get somewhere in the middle and you no longer like it. Or the creativity just starts going and you think of ideas you like better. And you're like, why am I doing this story? I just thought of this other one. I should start again. And you just keep doing that forever and you'll never finish anything. So I was like, this is the story. I'm sticking to it. And it's funny that it came up, because I was actually just looking. It came up this past weekend. I was talking to someone, and for some reason it came into my head, and I was mentioning it. And I couldn't quite remember like the whole story. Yeah. And so yesterday I was going back through, and I found like one of the versions of the screenplay. It was kind of funny to see.
Yeah. So is that something that you're trying to, would you try to like reincorporate that again later? Like, is that part of something you want, or is that more like, oh, I tried doing that and it actually just like was helpful as a writing tool in stand-up?
No, I would definitely write something scripted again. So during the pandemic, one of the things I did, since we had all that free time, or during the lockdown.
Yeah.
Pandemic.
What's happening anymore?
One of my projects when we were all like locked in at home was to write a pilot, but I did it the same way. Like I took an online pilot writing class, and in that one it was the same structure. Like we're gonna, if you do the work every week and you show up and blah blah blah, by the end of it you will have written a pilot, like a 30-page, sitcom-y pilot. And so I did it, and like I think there was a class of like 10 or 12 people. I think I'm the only one that actually finished. And it mostly was for the same reason. It'd be like week 4, and people were still like, "I just thought of a better idea I want to do." It's like, well, now you're done.
Yep.
But so that, and it's it's a similar exercise. It's also like a big, undertaking. But I really enjoy that kind of thing. So I think writing, trying to take like a story, and whether it's maybe it's a short film, maybe it's a feature film, maybe it's a TV show or whatever. And I'm sure none of them will ever see the light of day other than on my computer. But like doing something like that, like I would absolutely do it again. It's just a question of time. And I feel like right now my time is better used, like writing jokes and like honing and editing stand-up material and working on that versus spending the time required to write a script. Although I do tinker with the idea of like if I took an hour or two a day and just dedicated it to stand-up writing, then over the course of a few months or so, something would get spit out the other end. Yeah,
there would be something on a page.
Something would be on a page, yeah.
So speaking of kind of writing your own scripts and producing your own things, you recently came out with your first, correct me if I'm wrong, special on YouTube.
Yes, stand-up
special, According to Plan.
According to Plan.
So when was the moment that you were like, okay, I'm going to record my hour. Here we go.
Oh, the morning I did it. No. Well, so the way that happened, before like the pandemic, if you go back, like various clubs have, various comedy clubs in New York will have an opportunity. Will give an opportunity to like a newer comic to do like a longer set, and they might call it like a breakout artist series or a headliner series or. At West Side Comedy Club, which is where I taped mine, I think they called it like Feature Fridays. And they only did a couple of them because it was a relatively new thing before March 2020 when everything closed. Woo. But they would give someone an opportunity to do like a longer set, like 25, 30 minutes on a Friday feature, And so people would do that and potentially film it, and then you'd have this thing. And I had asked, when things reopened, I kind of asked, hey, are you going to bring that back? Because that's something I'd kind of be interested in doing. And we sort of talked about it for a few months. And the booker at some point asked me, like, do you want to do it? Do you want to do one of those shows? And I said, absolutely. And this was like probably March of, what year is it? 2022.
2022. Maybe.
And I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. And then we picked like a date and we locked in like Thursday, June 2nd, 8 o'clock show. And it was sort of my show to design. And the idea is I'll do a longer set, but I quickly was like, okay, I'm not gonna do 30 minutes. I'm gonna do like as long as I can go. Like I want to. So that gave me like put a flag in the ground of this June 2nd date where I was going through all my material and every like show I did or open mic or whatever. I was thinking about it in the context of how would this fit in if I was trying to do like a full hour. And then after like a month, I was like, I think I have plenty of material. The problem is going to be. I'm not like a touring headliner where I get to go do it a bunch before I film it. I got like one shot on June 2nd. So how do I prepare to try to make that work? And somehow I managed to pull it off.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, and the special really is great. Definitely go check it out. I'll link it in this video. Hopefully it's popping up right now. That'd be cool.
But I was very like, I was outwardly non-committal about what I was, like I didn't really tell anyone what I was doing. Everyone knew there was a show and I was marketing to try to get people there. But I don't think anyone really knew that it was like, oh, he's going to try to record this thing and make a special.
Yeah.
Because I was prepared to fail, so I didn't want to make it too public. I mean, people figured it out eventually. But like even like, I procrastinated on like hiring people to film it and stuff, and because I was thinking like, well, you know, worst, I'll try it. It'll like I'll do an hour, and if it like worst case is I'll have a bunch of YouTube clips, and
yeah.
I don't need sophisticated, expensive cameras for that. But then, you know, 2 or 3 weeks before, I was like, maybe I should actually. It's really coming together, and like I like it. Maybe I should film it properly. So then there was a bit of a scramble to get everything in place, and make sure it was going to look good and stuff.
No, my friends get mad at me because they're like, Carly, you didn't tell us you were doing this thing. I'm like, I was ready for it to be nothing. And now it's the night before.
And after I decided that like I wanted it to be something bigger, I gave myself a few weeks of just not telling anyone that, because I wanted to just make sure that it was going to like achieve some minimum level of quality before I like dragged everyone tried to guilt everyone I know into showing up and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's such a thing with people are so quick to share. They're like, oh, I've decided I'm doing this big thing, and I'm doing it. And I actually hear that a lot from, no shade again, but like writers will be like, oh yeah, I'm working on this thing. But I feel like if when people start telling you about the big thing they're working on too soon, it almost like jinxes it, because it weirdly corrupts the motivation behind it, where it's like, now I'm doing it for you, I'm not doing it for me. Right. So it's almost
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, like it's almost like you have to check in with yourself. Like, personally, I don't really tell people a lot of the things that, like, if I have something coming up, until I'm like, no, I'm certain it's happening. I'm over 50% done knowing it's going to happen and it's going to be good. And so I think it makes actually a lot of sense, and I think speaks to the quality and how successful it's been on YouTube, that you were like, I'm going to let this sit and it's going to happen.
Well, I also was like very aware of how most comedians like will do a special, and which is first of all, they're far more established than I am. And they create jokes. They go out on the road for like a year doing that hour 5 times a weekend in different cities, and every time they're like editing it and tightening it and crafting it until it's like exactly what they want it to be. And then they go and they record, like they do like 2 shows or sometimes 4 shows over 2 days, record them all, and then they have these 4 like versions that they can kind of edit together. And I was like, I got one. I have to record it the very first time I do it in front of people, and I have 1 show. So anything that doesn't work just has to get cut out. So like I think the set was like 62 minutes, right? That could have ended up as a 20-minute YouTube clip if like most of it had not worked or something had gone wrong or whatever. But it didn't. It went quite well. Yeah,
it very much did. Did you, now that you do have like the hour, have you, and I know, when did it come out? It was 2 weeks ago?
It's been like 11 days, I think.
It's the...
I shouldn't know that quickly, but I do.
It's been 11 days, 10 hours. Who's counting? Yeah. But the... have you started... I hear a lot of comedians say that it's like, people started being like, oh, come do this because you now have a product you have. Like, have you been seeing that at all? Or is it still kind of early out where you're just like, it's on YouTube, which is fair because it's been 11 days.
I think it's a bit of both. Like, so we talked about this off camera before we started recording, but like I was just at the World Series of Comedy in Las Vegas, right? Where we were both there a year ago.
It's true.
You didn't come this year because you're lazy, but no, because you had better things to do. Because you're busy. Did I say lazy? I meant busy. Freudian slip. But like, you know, when I was talking to there's a lot. It's a festival where there's a lot of bookers that watch you. It's almost like it's a job fair for comedians. And you know, talking to one of the bookers, like it came up that I'd done this thing, and she immediately was like, "Send me the link." So, I mean, I think there's something nice about having that, because if someone's like, you know, do you have 30 minutes? Because often people will be like, we'll ask a comic, do you have a certain amount of time? And they don't, or they don't quite. Can be like, yeah, here, you know, I've done an hour, here it is, you can watch the whole thing, and that's powerful. And to your point, like I don't think you need to have an hour on that someone can watch to have a product, but I do think that one of the traps as a new comedian is trying to sell a product that you don't have yet.
Yeah.
And, you know, even if you're just trying to feature, which is kind of where I'm at, like I'm more of a feature, I'm not like a headliner yet, I'm more of a feature act, which is, you know, anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, maybe half an hour every once in a while. But you can't be like emailing bookers all over the country asking to feature when you don't have the product that you could actually feature with. And now, I definitely do. Because the thing about having that that hour is like I can pick which 30 minutes of it I do.
Yeah.
So if a crowd isn't going to like a certain type of joke, like you can sort of pivot to a different type of joke or different content. And I think some people have there's this idea, right, that like as soon as you put something out, you can't tell those jokes anymore. Mm-hmm. There's that some people that's sort of an old school idea, but it's like, and it's doing well on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But I can go to any show in the city and no one will have seen it.
That's so true.
Like it's not, if as soon as like 10 million people watch it, I'll stop doing those jokes.
Yeah.
So I got plenty of time to do those jokes. Like that, for the rest of my life.
Good,
I got the rest of my life. It would be a great problem to have for enough people to see that everyone in a, because it's also like, it's very different once you've established yourself enough that you have your own fans. Like mm-hmm. if you're so big that when you go to a club, your fans show up, then you might assume they've watched everything you've put out. But mm-hmm. when you're not that person, when people are showing up at a club, if you're on a show, people are there not for you. They're there because they want to see a good comedy show. They haven't watched everything you've put out. They don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty safe.
In terms of like not being ready versus having the goalpost, like, and I think that's something people get kind of scrambled about sometimes. How do you think, you were even saying that setting that goal changed how you were writing, and I think it's the difference of like how, could you just talk more about how that ended up changing your mindset when you were going to, because I think so many people feel like they're kind of at mics and things feel like they're telling jokes into the void. And it's like, oh, there's this. But then when you have something where it's like, oh, I'm putting this show on, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because one of the traps of open mics, I think, and maybe it's a little specific to New York, because I know in other parts of the country, open mics actually do get like real audience members. But in New York, it's mostly to comics, who may or may not be paying attention. They may be more thinking about the jokes they want to do than absorbing what you're saying. But also, you see a lot of the same people as you're doing different mics, so they've heard your stuff before, and it becomes very traumatizing when you're trying to work on a joke, but you're telling it to people that have just heard it 100 times.
Yeah.
So it's like they're not going to pick up on the nuance that you paused an extra second before like the third sentence or something, which maybe makes all the difference, but they're not paying attention. So it's tricky to do that. But once you're like, I'm working on this thing to get it down and get the muscle memory of telling it, because in 3 weeks I'm going to record it and it needs to work. It's easier to get through that sort of anxiety of none of these people are going to laugh because they've all heard it before. And also it's just motivating to write, because you start to want to have like, you've got all these jokes and you're putting them together in a sort of, you got your set list, what's the order, and you're trying to think of like, how do you make it seem sort of like this seamless stream of thought, as opposed to just joke 1, now joke 2, now joke 3. And because you're going to do it in a month or 2 months or 2 weeks or whatever it is, for some reason I think your brain just starts putting it together in a way that that's hard for you to do when there's no reason to. And I also found like there's some jokes on there that I wrote in the last 2 weeks before I taped it, just because your brain's going and you're like, what'd be perfect right here, a joke about this. Yeah. And then it just like appears and you do it a couple times and it's new and fresh, so it comes out really well. What
was the latest you wrote a joke before it went into the special?
There's one thing in there that was written like a couple days before.
Love it.
But it was a specific joke that it wasn't something that I could do on other shows, because it was very specific to that moment. Because it was I wanted people to understand that so I wanted what I already told you about. Like a lot of comics will tape multiple shows and edit it together and blah blah blah, and they've run this hour 100 times before they tape it. I wanted people to know what I was doing, and so there was a joke about it, and it's like 27 minutes in, I sort of referenced that and told, and I was like, but it's got to be funny. Mm-hmm. So there's a fun little joke in there that was like, it was written a couple days before, had never been done in front of people before, and it worked great.
That's great. You wouldn't have caught it if you didn't just say it.
You would not know. You wouldn't necessarily know if you just listened to it. Like you wouldn't necessarily. Now that I've told you what it's about, you'd be able to find it. And I gave you kind of where, like 27 minutes in, listen for it. But
I actually think I know the joke you're talking about.
Oh, which one do you think? Oh, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, I mean, if you want,
this is a real test of whether you actually watched it.
Yeah, isn't it the one where you tell everyone it's like, oh, do you want to hear this joke that it didn't make the hour?
Oh, well, that's not the one, but that's a similar one. That's a similar one that was like thought of in in like the last week.
Oh,
before.
or there was, because then there was that one. And, oh, I guess there was also the one that's like people spend all their time. I decided I'm going to do it the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flip the script joke. And then there was the 14,605 ways this could go.
Yep.
That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
I watched it. Haha.
And that was a very specific reference that not everyone would get, but enough people I thought would get it.
Yeah.
And even if you didn't get it, there were enough context clues to understand what was going on.
Definitely. What was the weirdest thing, or like the most random thing that you learned from self-producing the special that you were kind of surprised to have found? Because I think there are things people assume they're going to learn along the way of doing something, and then the thing that's like, oh my god, I didn't think that was relevant at all, but it's actually super important.
Oh wow, I learned so much about doing it. Is there like a category of thing that you're thinking of? Because there's the technology and like how do you record audio in a comedy club so that you can edit it properly and what angles should you use? How many cameras do you need? There's all the sort of logistical technical stuff.
How many cameras did you use? Or?
So we had like 3 main cameras. And then I scrounged around for any other camera I could find. And so we had maybe 6 or 7 actually filming.
Dang.
But we didn't use them all.
Yeah.
It was just like, if I'm doing this and I got one shot at it, let's put a camera everywhere, like, if you can.
Yeah.
But there was like kind of 3 main sort of high quality cameras and then a couple other random ones. I think we ended up using maybe 5 different, like some footage from 5 of the cameras in the thing.
But
most of it is from the 3. Most of it is from the 2 really good cameras. The third one is in it a little bit, and then like 4 and 5 appear every once in a while.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think we're kind of running low on time. So last question before I'm like, oh, promote your other social media and stuff, is what is something comedy related or otherwise that you wish people would ask you about more but never do?
Oh.
It's my favorite interview question.
What? So, like, what I wish people would ask.
Yeah.
But no one asks.
Like, just as a person in your life.
That's like a big, broad question, isn't it?
It's a very broad question.
What would people ask me about?
Or really just something like you wish you had, like, an excuse to talk about more.
Have you ever been asked that question? What would
no,
you
it's
answer?
my question.
But
no, this is your...
No, but just so I understand, like, the type of thing.
Like, I think it's a hard question.
Exactly. It's a really hard question.
I'll answer it though. Like I'm actually like a huge Alice in Wonderland person. I actually collect copies of the book.
Okay.
So I have like World War, like I have
like in different languages and
same language. So far, all same language, but like different time periods. Like there's one from like World War I era, and then there's one from like Alice's Adventures Underground, which is actually an early edition of the book because it's before it was out. It's a whole thing.
Would they change the title?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, they didn't change the title. Like he changed the title like when he was still developing the book.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a short version of my answer.
So you wish that people would just know to ask you about Alice in Wonderland?
No. It's not the question. I wish people would know to ask me. It's more like, if people would give me and like it's. I guess the question's kind of like, no one ever asks me about this, but it's more of like this never comes up in conversation, but if it did, that would be nice.
Okay.
Or like fun.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Oh man. Nothing jumps to mind, which is a terrible.
We all know everything
answer.
about you.
Well, no, because there's. I mean, clearly there's things people don't know,
Yeah.
but most of those are deep, dark secrets that.
They're not whimsical.
They're not whimsical. I wish people would ask me how much time I spend on the dark web more. Yeah, no, that would be a nice conversation. No. Oh man, that's a really good question. Because I do I like talking about. I have this like weird sort of myopic, like obsessive personality trait, kind of where like when I like for the last 4 or 5 years of my like finance career, I was on the investing side, so it was like analyzing companies and so like that was what I did. Like that was my job, but then at night I'm like reading books about investing, and I'm like it's like, and then when I started comedy, it was like that gaze just shifted to like stand up.
Yeah.
And then I'm like read some books about stand up. I'm like going to open mics. I'm like writing jokes. I'm like watching specials, and I'm on YouTube watching people's Tonight Show sets, and it's just like this all focused thing. So stuff on the periphery gets kind of like pushed away.
So then adapting the question, what is probably the most niche thing that you've had that kind of myopic view of?
Like I went through a phase where like at the time I had a job, so I still had to pursue the job. But there's two things I'll say. So I went through one phase where all I did in my free time, like all I did was read about World War II.
Nice.
That was it. That was it. And then a little bit on World War I, but mostly just World War II. And I just was fascinated by it. It was like interesting. There's a lot of books. And then the other thing I did with like, this was like maybe 3 or 4 months of just laser focus, was track down an authentic Indiana Jones costume. So like
that's great.
Like it got to the level of like I found the guy that made them for the last, not the movie that just was filmed that's coming out next year, but like the previous one from like 10, 15 years ago. I found the guy that made the leather jackets for that movie and had him make me, not 1, but 2.
That's incredible.
I found like the place in London where like they got the hats and like they had them send me a hat. Like so I went the details like in the original Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, who was a carpenter before he became a movie star, and he just in the first movie, the boots are just his carpentry boots, and I like tracked down exactly what type of boot it was and like got the boot. Like it was intensive research and attention to detail, and it was problematic. It was like I was at work on the internet, like researching like Harrison Ford's carpentry boots when I should have been, buying and selling companies. You know what I mean?
Wait, when did the Indiana Jones obsession start?
Well, I mean, I saw like when did the first movie come out? In '84 or something like that. Like I saw that probably within a few years of like as a little kid.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it and being like, "This is the best thing ever," and then I think it started when I realized I could.
Yeah.
Like if I knew years before that I could just research it and buy. Like I've always wanted that leather jacket since the day I saw the movie. Who sees that movie and doesn't? Like if you could just go to a store and buy that, like who wouldn't do that? You're insane if you wouldn't buy that jacket. It's the best.
Good point.
It's the best. So I have like 6 of like I have the 2 ones that the guy made me, but then I have these like replicas that I found before I found the guy. Because I would find some company in like based in wherever that makes like a replica one, and I would look at it and it's like it's real leather. It's like, but they've just looked at stills from the movie and tried to reconstruct it.
Yeah,
and they're pretty good. And I'll wear like if it's gonna rain, like I'll wear those sometimes because they're, I love the fall when it gets cold enough to wear the Indiana Jones jackets. Because you can wear it like with like jeans and stuff, and no one quite knows. It's when you put the hat on, you're like, oh. And then I kept finding better ones.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I got to get that one now. And then when I found the guy, I was like, wow.
You had to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So now I have this closet of Indiana Jones jackets at home.
Great. Good to know. All right. Well.
And 2 hats. Because I got the real hat, but then I have a replica hat if I'm going to go out with the hat, which doesn't happen that often. Don't worry. But like every once in a while for like a Halloween party or something, if I decide, or like I'll probably have to dress up and go to the new movie,
Exactly.
Which I did for the last one. But like if it's going to rain or something, I don't want to wear the real hat because it's expensive, and I can't just get another one. So you wear the replica.
Well, that makes a lot. You've really thought through.
And you got to grow out the stubble for a few days. There's a lot goes into putting on the costume.
To cosplay as Indiana Jones, there's a lot of effort involved.
Okay, what is cosplay? Like,
it's just like dressing up as characters.
Because I always thought it also involves some sort of pornographic sexual thing.
I don't think so. I think cosplay is just like...
That's just my type? Okay.
Yeah, no.
I always thought it felt a little... The word... I always assumed it was a little dirty.
I think it's just like costume... Yeah, I hear that now.
Like, I felt like it's a porn category. That's what I'm saying. As opposed to just like, I like wearing a costume and like...
I've never heard it in that context, but I'm sure it exists in that context.
Okay. That's
interesting.
Okay. My bad.
No, that's not... Because now I'm thinking, maybe it is. Maybe I should stop saying... No, but I think it's probably not normal. I was going to be like, my friend's cosplay.
Because it's like play. Like, it's the word play. Because there's other words you put in front of play. Yeah. We don't need to say any of them on but you can fill in the gap, and you're like, oh, that person's into some weird shit,
Yeah, it's true. Well, anyway, on that note, That concludes our Adam. Is there any social media or anything you want to promote?
Yeah, go to my my YouTube channel is Adam Muller Comedy, and Muller is spelled Muller, so it's spelled Muller. But Adam Muller Comedy is my YouTube channel. Watch the special, subscribe, comment, whatever, and then at Adam.Muller on Instagram. Give me a follow there if you feel so inclined. I would love it.
Great. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
Thanks for
watching.
Enstarz, please be
sure
to like, comment,
and
subscribe. Yay!